Key Review 6, Human Diversity and Intercultural Communication. The 4 forms of human diversity are gender, as culturally constructed, versus sex, which is biological. Sexual orientations are patterns of attraction and identity. Ethnicity, which are shared cultural heritage. Age, life stages. Gender, again, is culturally constructed versus sex, which is biological. Gender refers to how someone identifies and expresses themselves. For example, feminine, masculine, or androgynous, which is a blend. Sex is biological. For example, 2 students assigned male at birth. One identifies as masculine and prefers direct, task-oriented communication. Another identifies as androgynous and can flex between task and relationship-focused talk. Sexual orientation are patterns of attraction and identity. It describes an individual's patterns of emotional, romantic, or sexual attraction to others, and their sense of identity based on those actions. Adapting your language to use partner instead of assuming boyfriend or girlfriend can help create an open communication environment. Third, ethnicity relates to our shared cultural heritage. It encompasses common language, traditions, value, and history among a group of people. Age diversity refers to the differences in communication styles, preferences, and perspectives that arise from varying life stages and generational experiences. You adapt your communication channel and pacing accordingly to accommodate their preference. So to review, the 4 forms of human diversity are gender, which is culturally constructed, versus sex, which is biological. Sexual orientation, which includes patterns of attraction and identity. Ethnicity, which are shared cultural heritage. And age, which are life stage differences. So what's the difference between high context and low context cultures? In low context cultures, communication is direct and explicit. Meaning is conveyed through precise words, detailed instructions, and unambiguous language, focusing on clarity and factual information. For example, submit the draft by Friday at 3. In high context cultures, communication relies heavily on implicit cues, shared understanding, and nonverbal signals. Meaning is often derived from context, relationships, and shared history, rather than explicit words. For example, it would help to have that soon, delivered with an expectant tone and a follow-up glance. Context implies a Friday deadline. So to review, low context cultures are more direct and explicit, where meaning is in precise words, whereas high context cultures rely heavily on implicit cues, shared understanding, and nonverbal signals. How can we differentiate between cultural value pairs? Decentralized versus centralized power. Individualistic versus collectivistic culture. Indulgent versus restrained culture. Decentralized power is where we have broad participation and flatter structures, where decision making is distributed. For example, a team votes on schedule changes involving everyone in the decision-making process. In centralized power, there's a clear hierarchy and authority concentrated at the top, with decisions typically made by a few individuals. For example, a manager announces the new schedule with little input from the team. An individualistic culture prioritizes personal goals, autonomy, self-reliance, often expressed with I language. For example, I need this for my portfolio emphasizes personal achievement. A collectivistic culture emphasizes group goals, duty, and harmony, with a strong use of we language. For example, let's choose what helps our team or our class, focuses on the collective benefit. An indulgent culture is characterized by a freer expression of enjoyment, where people expect to pursue fun and gratification. A good example is celebrating small wins loudly and enthusiastically. A more restrained culture has pleasure and gratification that are regulated by strict social norms, leading to more modest displays of joy. An example is the quiet acknowledgement of success, with a continued focus on duty and work. So to review, we have decentralized versus centralized power, individualistic versus collectivistic culture, indulgent versus restrained culture. So what is the difference between masculine or instrumental feminine are expressive, and androgynous orientations. In masculine are instrumental. Communication is goal, task, and outcome focused. It's often direct and assertive. It prioritizes achieving objectives efficiently. For example, what's the target? In feminine and expressive orientations, we have a relationship and harmony focus. Emphasis is on supportive communication and attention to how things are said. For example, before we divide tasks, how's everyone feeling? An androgynous orientation is characterized by a flexible blend that switches between instrumental and expressive approaches as needed, adapting to different situations and interpersonal dynamics. For example, checks on teammate stress and proposes a concrete task plan. So to review, we have masculine are instrumental, feminine are expressive, and androgynous orientations. How can we identify 5 barriers to bridging differences? This includes assuming superiority or ethnocentrism, assuming similarity, assuming differences, stereotyping, and prejudice. The barrier of assuming superiority is also called ethnocentrism. It's characterized by our way is better, assuming identity, expecting others to behave as you do. An example is planning jokes that fall flat with an international audience. Assuming differences, treating others as entirely different, thereby missing common ground. For instance, avoiding small talk with a deaf classmate instead of learning basic signs or using text. When people stereotype, they're overgeneralizing from limited information. Prejudice is when we have negative judgments directed toward a group. For example, discounting a teammate's idea due to their age. So the 5 barriers to bridging differences are assuming superiority or ethnocentrism, assuming similarity, assuming differences, stereotyping, and prejudice. So what is intercultural communication competence, and what are some strategies that we can use? This is the ability to adapt your communication with people from different backgrounds so messages are effective and ethical. It includes knowledge, motivation, and skill. Knowledge is when we actively seek information about cultural norms, values, and preferred communication channels. We use respectful questions to reduce uncertainty and enhance understanding. Motivation is how we cultivate tolerance for ambiguity. We recognize that some confusion is natural. We practice mindfulness to observe our own assumptions and use positive self-talk to encourage adaptation. Third is skill. This is where we develop an other-oriented perspective by socially decentering and expressing empathy. We adapt our messages by adjusting wording, examples, timing, and channels, and confirm understanding through brief recaps and perception checks. Intercultural competence strategies include knowledge, motivation, and skill.